Welcome, everyone. I'm Vijay Narayanan. I'm a fellow at Fellows Fund, and I've been a fellow for the last about almost 4 years now. So very excited and privileged to be with this set of technical leaders in the enterprise industry today. And as we start, just wanted to do a quick, very scientific show of hands poll. How many of us here have used an AI-powered app or tool this week? So between Monday and today, how many of us have used it at work? So pretty much everyone, okay. And so among those of us who have used at least one tool, in a scale of 0 to 10, with 10 being the highest, how would you rate your experience on the tool being 9 or 10? So on the very high end of the scale. Wow, 0. All right. And how many of you would rate your experience somewhere between 6 and below? 6 and below. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Let's say maybe around 10. So, so our NPS is negative in this very. Okay, so that's a good start, and I think really emphasizes the need for this panel. So, would love to kick off. As we kick off, if I may request each of our panelists to introduce themselves. Briefly share who you are, your role, and one sentence about your company. Harry, do you want to kick it off?
Sure. So, does this work? Okay. I'm Harry, co-founder and CEO of Motion. We are basically building an entire suite of business applications, business needs, with agents natively embedded to handle all of their client work from sales to actually doing the work for them and delivering.
Hi, everyone. I'm David Hoang. I'm the VP of Design for AI at Atlassian. I was at Replit before. The short version I would describe Atlassian is teamwork AI.
Hey, everybody. I'm Hemal. I work on the product team at OpenAI, and I look after ChatGPT for work. So it sounds like I need to get some feedback from all of you on the 6s and the lows.
Hey, this is Vasu. I'm Chief Data and AI Officer for Centific. In Centific, our focus is to make AI ready for enterprises and consumers. We do that with a bunch of human-in-the-loop experts spread across 200 languages, 100 plus domains with 1 million people across the globe to help curate, validate, and benchmark the LLM models.
Hey everyone, Matan, head of product at Writer. Writer is an end-to-end agentic platform built for the enterprise. Our sole focus is Fortune 500 and Global 2000s, and we work with the majority of both of these lists. We own from the model layer to the RAG layer to the guardrails to the application, and then also to the solution and deployment. Enterprises, if you give them just an API, don't know what to do with it. They need help when it comes to change management, and that's where we come in.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. So as we kick off, let's start with just understanding what are the different types of interactions between humans and AI, right? So we can broadly, I think, have about 5 different types. The first one is where the human is the driver, right? And we use AI as and when needed. And we do this deliberately, and we are in full control of how we use the AI, when we use it, what goes in, what comes out, we curate the output, everything. The second mode, and this is, I think, broadly called as an operator mode. The second mode, I would imagine as more like a collaborator, maybe as a junior collaborator, where the human still is figuring out most of the work to be done, and the AI helps the human in a few tasks. Sort of human plus AI behavior. The third stage, I would imagine, is something like a consultant, where it's still human and the AI, but the AI does more and more of the tasks individually, and the human is consulting the AI, the AI is consulting the human more as peers. The fourth one could be something like an approver mode, where the AI does most of the work, but still checks in with the human before it takes some critical actions on behalf of the humans, typically called as the human on the loop. And the last stage is full autonomy, where the AI is operating by itself, and literally the human is out of the loop here, right? So we're just observing the AI doing its thing and periodically checking how it did. So if you look at these 5 different ends, 5 different points in the spectrum of how the human and the AI systems can collaborate, would love to hear from maybe all of you, each of you, what your thoughts are, and what are the types of design patterns you think are appropriate for these stages, and even how do we design these design patterns so that the human AI design collaboration can move seamlessly across these stages. So what are you learning? What are your thoughts around this? I'm sure if like this is as the first question in our panel, would appreciate to hear from this from all of you. So maybe Matan-Paul, do you want to start from your end, and then?
Yeah, my microphone was taken, so I'm sorry. We'll have to share. So if I look at our focus as a company and the work we're doing in the enterprise space, our belief that across all of these, as the same as with any new technology, it's about transparency and trust, and how do you build that? And while the technology and the experience are still new, we default to more rather than less information upfront in the user's eyes, so they can validate, some call it hallucination, whatever. But the point here is, how do you build that trust between the user and then the AI or the agent or whatever? And it's all for the goal of, as you establish that trust, then you can start obfuscating things more to the background, while you also deploy more widespread into the organization. I would say that is high level. It doesn't matter if it's like type 1 or type 5 agent or AI, that's like the approach we've taken. And as we come to new, let's say, clients or businesses or opportunities, you see that gradual maturity of them when it comes to the trust in the system itself. It's like you're rewiring the enterprise to accept that this thing is actually working. Luckily for all of us, it's a little maybe easier because we're all using also AI in our private lives, so it's not like completely scratched. But enterprise has this little thing called IT and CISO and InfoSec that does require those things to also happen from a compliance and so on. So that's the kind of stuff that is really, really important as we think about it.
Yeah. So we also view exactly it's a journey of trust. Okay. So it starts with the data, what you do with the data. We make sure that the data has to be unbiased, and we should be able to validate each one of those things with a human in the loop for everything. As it more matures into the collaborator and this thing, the human oversight is important. That's where design patterns like the policy-based controls and the observability and explainability becomes the cornerstone of the thing. And as it goes into more autonomous, then it is primarily you apply oversight based on the risk-based. It's a low risk, it becomes a little bit more autonomous. When at a high risk, human oversight is needed. And for everything, the explainability and the reasoning is the key. And we need to keep every audit logs and editing to build the trust as we mature the AI agents from through the maturity curve. And that's what we do. And everywhere the human oversight is needed to make it much more reliable, then only the trust becomes the key in adoption.
I really love the way that you outline the 5 stages of how you can go and build starting from basics all the way up to autonomy. I think that as builders, we get so excited about you have new technology and you want to go straight to level 5, just straight to automation overall. And it's really tough when you're introducing new technologies to users to actually earn their trust of what you are putting out there and what you're designing are actually going to earn you the right to get to that. So the thing that I really think about is start very simple. And I think if you start simple, especially with explainability, you're going to earn the right to get from that first stage to that fifth stage overall. From there, I think this was already mentioned, but there are the 3 T's of then how you can go and design, which is 1, what is the actual tasks that you are designing around, right? Do you have the right set of data? Do you have the right set of scope and box? And do you have the right set of KPIs to go and evaluate? Are you actually doing something that is meaningfully improving when you introduce AI? Second, do you have the right trust, right? So do you have the right evals, and do you have the right way to make sure that you have a good trusted system of what's happening? I think third is then, do you have the right tethers? So we talked about whether that's human in the loop or whether that's the auditability, whether that's for the end customer or for you as a builder going on. I really think about starting simple and then just making sure you're choosing the right task, you can build in the right trust, and you can build in the right tethers as you think about that walk from the first stage to the fifth stage.
Yeah, I just want to +1 everything these wonderful folks said about trust and just build on that. But I think one thing from a design principle, I always think it's important to be able to go through that spectrum of abstraction and really identify what is it you're trying to do. I'll give you an example is like if you're driving a car and you have full self-driving versus like manual driving, if I'm driving I-5 down like through all these like cow farms and through Bakersfield, I may just want it fully autonomous. But if I'm going down Highway 1 through Big Sur, I want to actually experience that and use that. And we all have tasks in our daily lives or at work that has that sort of principle. So that's how I like to think about it. It's like it's very contextual. So, for us, whether it's like you can always like use Gen AI to write a JIRA work item, but if you actually want to be doing the work yourself, there is that personal control based on what the thing you're trying to do, where you can flip and turn those as if they're different gears too.
Harry?
To add on to what David said, I fully agree with that. It depends on the context, right? I kind of, if you think about it, there are some stuff that's already at like L4, almost L5, right? I kind of think about this on 2 dimensions. It's like one dimension, you could think from 0 to 10, it's like, how good is AI at this? Like, how accurate is AI at this? And the other dimension is like, how safe is this task, right? It's like for example, right? That's also from 0 to 10. And for example, if you're sending like a wire of like $2 million, yeah, that task is extremely unsafe. That's like a 0 on that spectrum. Versus if you're just generating some text, that's like very safe task. That's a 10 on the spectrum. And you kind of like multiply these two, right? Like, how good is AI at it? How accurate is AI at it? Multiply by like, how safe is this task? That's kind of like, basically the higher that number, the less like, the less you have to tell the human, right? And the lower that number is, the more you have to surface that to the human, because like, AI is not as good and it's also not as safe to perform that.
Yeah. So the one common theme that emerged in all of your answers is the notion of trust, where it's almost as if the AI has to earn the trust of the humans. And Harry really liked your point there about thinking about this, you don't have to earn trust in every task. There are certain tasks, it might be calibrated according to the risk factor of the tasks. So thanks for that. So now just drilling into this next level, right? So if we think that, okay, trust and transparency and these AI systems, in a sense, having to earn the trust of humans is core, then what design patterns can we build in our AI systems so that they can earn the human trust? Of course, maybe calibrated to different tasks differently. What design patterns do you see succeeding, failing, or are we still in the experimentation mode where we are still figuring it out? Anybody else? David, Harry, Vasu?
Yeah, so the common patterns which is actually emerging as the use case basis, the first one is the policy and guardrail engines, which is primarily you actually create a policy based on the vector. There are essentially two vectors. One is the accuracy of the AI engine itself, the risk it is taking, and how safe it is in terms of this thing. Then the second one is, which is common, which is coming, especially when when the complexity is moving from more deterministic to more probabilistic, then you will get something like a chain of debate kind of a stuff where you validate one or two or three results coming from multiple agents and see what is the probabilistic nature of it. But the common pattern in implementing the chain of debate is the data silos that will come later, that we need to figure it out, because that becomes an additional information that provides or that conforms to a decision or that is, for example, if I'm here a gunshot, I look for a video where that gunshot has happened, and then to corroborate the evidence and see whether there is chances of improving the false positive. So these are all patterns which is emerging. And we have also seen, especially when in a high risk environment, the controlled deployment or a limited deployment happens to see how the system is performing in a real time, in a real world scenarios. And we have seen multiple places where a limited rollout gives a lot more rules and policies to be enforced upon it. What we call it as a sandbox dry run or a limited deployment that happens as a. These are all the common patterns which we have seen in terms of it, with chain of debates is becoming much more predominant in terms of resolving the queries. And it also provides human judgment. That's how the human actually takes the decision. So that's the design patterns is emerging.
I'd like to think
Hemal?
about this as if you were hiring a intern or just a new employee in the office. What are some things that you would employ in place to know that this was actually working well and earning your trust? And if you have like a new employee in the office, you typically say, when they do a task, explain your thinking. I think this is the chain of debate or chain of thought. And so if we look at some of the way like foundational models have evolved over time, it's trying to do a better job of explaining, here's what I'm actually looking up, here's what I'm doing. And I think that pattern should continue to evolve to say, I can actually understand what you're doing, how you're thinking, how you're reasoning through this as a way to earn your trust. Two, I think this was very much what you were sharing around, just like there's a rubric of different types of tasks and actions that you can go and take. So if you were just doing something where it's text-based and you were pulling in information and kind of synthesizing and reading, that's probably not something where you would typically ask an employee to go and check in with you before they actually go and take the next step. But if they were going to go and take all that information, synthesize it, and send it out or write action to something else, you'd probably want some confirmation on, can you explain your thinking and make sure you get my confirmation before I go and do something. And these are two that are user-facing, but then there are the ones that are internal, right? So if we had the same type of employee, how would we know that they have the right rubric, that they're asking the right questions, that they're focusing on the right things, and that they're making progress? And so I think this is where evals, especially in like the product building days, are becoming more and more important. Do you have the right ways to check that this is doing what you want it to do, or when it went off track, why? And can you make sure that you can course correct for future patterns overall?
Yeah. So chain of debates, asking it to explain when needed, and evals, right? Putting them into your systems earlier on. Thank you. So on that, so just drilling into this, I think somebody mentioned here, hey, I think Harry, you mentioned there's a spectrum of risks as well. It's not just spectrum of autonomy, there's a spectrum of risks. And it's really a matrix, and you have to figure out what level of autonomy you want to operate in tasks with certain level of risks. So on that, where should we draw this line? Because there is this notion about, hey, we want AI to sometimes become very subliminal, being part of the environment, ambient AI, so it just blends into the background, etc. And then in some cases, you really want it to not do that. You really want to know this is happening, and these are the areas of risk where I don't trust you enough. I want you to explain to you, etc. How do you think about this, especially in terms of product design? So maybe David, if you want to chime in on some.
Yeah, I kind of describe with AI, we're in this era where we're in this skeuomorphic era, right? For like when the iPhone was launched, glass device, multi-touch interaction, you needed these sort of patterns that were quite literal for people to kind of understand like how the system works. There's probably something with cloud computing the same when people started seeing file sync for the first time. I think AI is still in that state right now where like because the level of comprehension for certain people using AI is highly variable, there needs some sort of like some sort of caveat or some way to preface that you're using AI because it may be like user understanding, it could be compliance and like other things that are important as well too. The other thing I'll add too is just like, yeah, that spectrum of risk, something that really resonates. And I think while you think about that, you have to balance end user experience too, because if you like optimized for full transparency, showing all the logs, and you're doing that in something that feels more like a lightweight consumer experience, that could be that could result in being a bad experience of showing everything. But if you're trying to do something that's a little bit deeper work, you might have you might show like low abstraction of that and just really show everything when you're doing an audit. So yeah, I think like AI is still in its skeuomorphic era, and like we're still trying to get people to have the training wheels on and kind of learn like these are the things. Like we have people in this room who live and breathe this stuff, right? But people who are using it in the workplace, it's still a new concept.
Anyone else? Sorry. Vasudevan, okay. So moving on, so enterprises, pretty much all enterprises today are figuring out how do we weave AI into their daily work processes and workflows and systems. So AI is obviously this new modern technology. It's the next generation, even after cloud and all these things, has its own, I would say, advantages, but also has obviously huge potential, but also has a lot of quirks. And so when we try to build or bring in AI into classical legacy software systems, enterprise systems, how do you see that journey going now? What challenges do you see? What patterns do you think is working? Any best practices? Does anyone want to take that? Yeah, Matan?
Yeah, so I think we treat these enterprises as like these mythical creatures almost. I think, yes, I think first and foremost there's this general problem in the valley that we think we know best. These companies got to where they got with like blood, sweat, and tears, and they know their business very well. There's a reason why they're a Global 2000 or Fortune 500, whatever index you want to use. And I think some level of being humble when you come in is really important. I think also sitting with them and truly understanding what they're trying to do. Now, you might think that their workflows are insane and you don't agree with them, but there's a lot of like organizational history of why certain things are done this way. It could be regulation, it could be whatever. And I think really understanding that and trying to understand where AI can come in is extremely important, because if you overshoot or miss that first entry point, you don't just damage your own option, you damage probably the whole industry within this organization. And some of you, I'm sure all of you have seen the MIT report, which is the newest report in many other reports about how we're all stuck in POC land and no agents are deployed. And yes, there are these stories, but I know from mine and the other people, some of the other people on stage, there are also a lot of stories where agents are deployed in production, making tremendous impact in enterprise. I think the other thing, what we've seen to be really, really valuable is we actually knowingly, when we come in, we work on the gnarliest, most disgusting use cases in the company. And the reason is, and there's other companies that do this, to be clear, but because what we found is if we unlock that use case, then the expansion within the org is trivial. And we work very closely with a stakeholder, and we agree on what are the criteria for success, because we don't want the goalpost to move after the fact. So we're like, what are we looking to achieve here? What are we looking to accomplish? And we do it either through our solutions team or with a partner like Accenture, KPMG, Deloitte, it doesn't really matter. and we work with them. The other thing is, and this is detrimental to us as an industry, and I see this in every conversation we have, is we need to re-educate the client. And what do I mean by that? I think ChatGPT is a great product, but I think it's the best and worst thing that happened to AI, because now everyone thinks that AI is chat, and there's an element of when we come in to like drag them out of that mindset and show like that chat is one interface to interact with AI, but there's other means when you start driving change in the organization and really showing them the art of the possible with these models. And I think that's like where there's a lot of time spent, which is you need to force them to think outside of like this co-pilot experience to something that is more elevated and can drive more ROI.
Yeah, all great points. I just wanted to add a few things, right? The challenge what we see in the legacy systems, which are all more like deterministic system, right? It does the job. There is a predictability, there is a repeatability of the task every time for that, whether it is an ERP or a CRM. But when we move into the AI, it is a probabilistic nature of the decisioning. So what the main challenge we see, apart from the change management and the use case part of it, is it exposes the data silos. Because for every decision making, for example, if my credit scores, for example, is say greater than 750, approving a loan doesn't require a great thing. But when I am taking like a 600 to 700 thing between the score, then I need to consider additional data points for what is the risk of what I am taking. And that's how the human judge. That's where it starts with integrating the data silos and training the model to make that happen so that it becomes much more moving towards a probabilistic decision making, right? And that's where, as rightly said, it moves from a suggestive chatbot interactive thing to a much more task that can automate, that can assist at the decision making and moving towards that. That is how we need to do that. The second major challenge in terms of probabilistic decision making is you need to have a very strong RLHF kind of a thing. And what RLHF does, the human feedback does, is all the context at which a human takes a decision has to be created through a knowledge graph or an explainability, how that the data has to be corroborated and all of the stuff. So that needs to be teaching. And that is the second major hurdle for enterprises to do it. How do I take this context, which is all built over a period of years, to do that? So we see embedding AI into this thing, it's not a wiring issue. It is a mindset change issue in terms of how do we do it. And it starts with integrating the data silos, creating an RLHF, a robust RLHF, which is for the thing, capturing the knowledge and transferring that knowledge into a knowledge graph that can aid the decision making. That's how we will move from a deterministic thing to a probabilistic systems.
Yeah. Well, so you brought up an interesting point about integrations with data. But I assume, especially in enterprise, the business processes integrate not just with data, but with different applications and with different other systems of record or engagement systems as well. And especially in the last year or two, we have seen a lot of startups emerge in this space, each one trying to solve one piece of this problem. So as an enterprise, as a customer, do we expect these agents to go integrate with every one of my systems in order to be useful, or are there any patterns or any frameworks we can use to simplify that? Harry, I know you guys have been looking at SMBs for, obviously you're spending a lot of time with SMBs, so where SMBs are probably using half a dozen other applications as well. So how do you think about this?
Yeah, so we most, for context, we serve SMB and mid-market. We don't really serve enterprise, so we serve businesses of less than 500 employees. And the fact that, so I was just chatting with a business that has like about 50 employees last week, and they were trying to evaluate a separate AI agent, like an AI marketing agent, an AI sales agent, like AI support agent, right, or AI admin like agent for each one of their departments. And each of their agent has to integrate with pretty much like, all of their applications to get the data in order to work. And they're just like, how are we ever gonna like, get this thing to work? We have all these applications and we have all these separate agents from all the different vendors who need to integrate with all the applications. And I think for like enterprise, the answer is for deployment engineers, right? Like, these Fortune 500, they can afford like millions of dollars. Startups will send, or vendors will send in like dozens of deployment engineers to solve this exact problem for them. But the thing is, like, small businesses, whether you're 20, 50, or 200 people, you can't afford that, you can't do that. So I think what's gonna happen is like, I think the end state needs to be the application, the platform layer, data layer, agent layer, especially for like the non-enterprises, it needs to be offered from a single place. They all need to be natively embedded and integrate with each other. And I think it's either the legacy applications that are gonna start building great agents right inside the applications, or the new agent companies will build the applications themselves. But I don't think the state of like a bunch of agents need to integrate with a bunch of applications and you need a ton of deployment engineers to do all that work, that will just not work, especially for SMBs and mid-market. So yeah, I think the end state is gonna be that.
So what's your recommendation?
Well, my recommendation is use motion, but that's exactly our thesis, right? Because at the end of the day, you want to build the best agent for your customers, and we all know the best agent requires the data and the context, and also requires the platform, because it's much more magical for an agent when the agent is natively embedded in the platform's UI UX. Like, you're doing sales, and then there's a button right there to like, oh, let's pull all the data from this client from everywhere, right? It's like, and it's very magical for it to be right inside UI UX, embedded directly, built from the ground up. So.
So I agree with a caveat. I actually think building agents is not the problem. Like, there's hundreds of frameworks and there will continue being hundreds of frameworks. That's not where the big challenge is. I think the challenge here is, if you sit with any CIO of a large company, they are absolutely terrified, not sleeping at night, to allow agents into their organization. It's not about how to build the agents, it's about how to scale. If you think of a large bank, 100,000 employees, it's not unheard of that they will have 50, 60, 100, 200,000 agents running around. That's never going to happen today, because our whole mindset when we think about security is still stuck in the constructs of APIs and machines, rather than, I have a really bad intern that can burn my business if I don't pay attention, especially if I have 100 or 200,000 of them without access control and permissioning. And I think that's the big challenge for us as we think of how to make agents from like a novelty that looks magical on Twitter to like game-changing for B2B in general, but especially in B2B enterprise. And it's about supervision and how to scale that. And whether it's a single platform or multiple platforms, I don't know, but like, I have opinions, but I don't know. And I think anyone also predicting what would happen in AI is a bit fallacy given the pace that the industry is moving. But again, we sit with CIOs in healthcare, finance, life sciences, and they're absolutely terrified. They all want agents. They just would need help from all of us to think how they can scale it. It's like getting 1 or 2 agents is not the issue. Going to 10,000, 100,000, that's where the challenge is. No one's going to review trillions lines of logs every day. Like, there needs to be a whole mind shift on how we do this. And funny enough, actually, if you start thinking about agents as humans, you're actually or conceptually humans, you're hitting a really interesting snag, because one of the problems we have in large organizations is scale. Like, managing 100,000 employees it's actually a really hard problem. So now what you're saying is a company that's 10,000 employees with 50,000 agents all of a sudden turned to a 60,000 employee company. So you're reorganizing the whole way the organization works. What does it mean to monitor that? What does it mean to scale it? How do you allocate tasks? And it's it's like a completely different way of structuring the organization that I just think we have not thought of, especially if we think of like, I'm not talking about like the top 100 companies in the world, but I'm talking like the longer tail of like the 5,000 companies, 10,000 companies in the world. It's just like a completely different mind shift. And I think that's where the big challenge is right now.
Thanks, Martin. I completely agree with you that organizational challenges and at scale, and how do we look at humans plus agents at that scale brings with it its own complexity. But before we even get to organizational, I want to maybe still stay at the level of the processes and the workflows and the deterministic nature of some of these business processes today, right? I mean, to first order, the APIs in an enterprise are deterministic, whereas AI does provide a lot of flexibility and fungibility. So how do you think about designing systems? When should we enforce the structure and the rigidity that comes out of that comes from very deterministic APIs, and when should we leverage this level of fungibility or some additional flexibility that AI gives? David, if you want to.
Yeah, it's just interesting when I kind of hear this conversation. It just makes me realize like how much like working with AI agents is just as much as working with a human being. Like you onboard someone, you give them context, you give instructions. Over time, there's this built intuition and built familiarity with the team that they're working with. You know, as far as like the AI context, there's probably things that you can have to build that additional context and that simulated intuition that can really be factors, right? This is maybe like the specific memory and context they have with the people they're working with, right? Like, and we've talked a lot about how important that graph and that context is important, but I think that's the thing, right? There's no like, at least from my perspective, there's no like, you just fully turn it on or off, but like the same way that we've been practicing, you know, agile for like 2 decades is that incremental like feedback loop. And I think that's how you think about whether it's an automation or an agent you're building, like that dial of determinism that you want to have is going to be like really important to me. That signal consistency can then build trust over time.
So I think, Matan-Paul, you mentioned earlier, you referenced this recent report from MIT that I think was a fairly interesting observation. But what signals do you think we can use today to even measure the successes or lack thereof of agents and AI systems within enterprises? Hemal, any thoughts? What do you guys use in OpenAI, for instance?
This might be so simplistic, but for me, it's still very much usage. I think that we are still so novel from like an early technology that enters into the workplace. We look at typical SaaS, lots of people get seats provisioned for them and they never actually use them overall. So it's really, do you actually even log in every day? Do you ask questions or do you hire us for different tasks? Then there's like depth of tasks. Now for us, we don't actually have the chance to go and look at user data, especially when you use a lot of our business or enterprise or API products. So this is really going to sit down with admins to understand what are the reasons that people actually ask for tools in the workplace that are AI native. But on top of that, I actually really think the point about CIOs and trust is massive. Who is actually pushing for adoption in the workplace? And if it is not somebody actually at the top, whether it is the CEO saying that this is actually a mandate for the company, or it isn't a recommended tool that CIOs actually feel comfortable provisioning, you are going to have a blocker where you're always going to be stuck in deployment land. I think that this is correct, where if you look at 9 out of 10 deployments are typically stuck because they actually haven't really deeply understood why do these companies not get a chance to go and deploy AI in the workplace. It's very rarely that it's not that you couldn't figure out how to connect to a legacy system. I think the Valley is very good at solving those super gnarly problems. We just are really bad at paying attention to the basics of tell me why, again, you have to have auditability for that regulator over there who's going to then fine you hundreds of thousands of dollars around it. So it really comes down with just basic usage and who is typically driving, adopting, or blocking the next person from getting the adjacent seat.
Good. Anyone else?
No, I totally agree. I think 100%. I couldn't. Yeah, I think the only other thing is that as you guys think about this, like really understanding the pain point and also being comfortable to say you don't need AI here. Like you just don't need the AI. Like you should just use something else. And being humble enough to tell the clients there's things that we're very good at. Here you can probably use like a basic NLP rule engine and being okay with that. You might lose the deal, but you will gain the respect of the client. So then when they do actually are ready to tackle these use cases, they'll come back to you. And I think that's fine. Like it's better than, so that's that. On what are the signals, I think, again, similar here, we don't look at input and output of customers at all. That's the nature of enterprise. But saying things like usage, which is more on like token consumption, for example, I think depth of usage in the sense, because there's a professional services element, so understanding the use cases and how ingrained they are versus something which is more like, I don't know, a co-pilot, which is like, yeah, changing the model in the back end is not that big of a lift, but something that's much more interconnected within the fabric of the organization. And push comes to shove is renewal and expansion. So like new use cases, more seats. Yes, you want to see if those seats actually use the license, but more seats. So those are all the factors to look at.
I was going to say also inherently too, like workplaces are inherently social, and especially for trying to introduce productivity gains. Like I think the virality of how fast does something go wall to wall is like a really good measurement. Like if somebody has a tip or a trick at work, typically it is known within the organization pretty quickly. And I think some of the best tools do spread very organically because they're viral. And so looking at some of the traditional consumer-led metrics around K factors is another one that is really good. Are you actually solving something, or are people sharing it because they're able to focus less on drudgery and more on judgment?
Good. So perhaps shifting gears and really looking at maybe the role of design in the evolution of this transformation of AI agents as maybe separate tools to now starting to become more and more teammates or collaborators more deeply. Harry, David, especially you guys, I know David, you are in the design function in Atlassian, and then Harry, you're designing a lot of these products for a different segment of the companies, right? The mid-market and the SMBs. What can design do, design as a function do to sort of support this shift of taking these AI systems from classical tools or applications to really becoming more and more teammates in the future? That's, I think, a little bit more around product evolution and how do we navigate this transition.
Yeah, I think we recently launched a study at Atlassian on AI collaboration. We found that like 96% of companies haven't felt the transformation, even though adoption has doubled. So people are using it more, but they're not seeing the ROI, and it makes you wonder like why. And it's probably we're still in our mental model and constructs on how workflows happen, right? So what's probably happening is people are generating more like emails using Gen AI, the other person on the other side summarizing it, and they're sending it back. And I think the role that design can really play, or like design, like capital D, lowercase d, just the intentionality of how you think about it is like, what is that ideal sort of like working relationship you want to have with AIs, right? I think a lot of times people kind of naturally fall to this default of like, hey, it's this anthropomorphic type of person that sits next to you. It's like when, television was first introduced and the television shows were just people sitting at the radio station and you're seeing the video, like the the behaviors have not like been pushed and innovated. And I think the thing that like, I'm just an optimist at heart. So I think for me, like what's exciting is just like what is possible of just like living this future and sharing it with our customers. Like what are the new roles that are going to develop from this type of design with this like collaboration with your AI teammates?
Got it. So today, a lot of these AI systems tend to be more text focused, right? To first order, it's more language models and language focused. I assume, especially as we go forward, multimodal interactions, right? Human-agent interactions are probably going to become a lot more commonplace. Any thoughts on what patterns or what interactions might be needed there? I think, David, you mentioned earlier that we are still figuring out what those actions and primitives are. Any thoughts on those? Maybe Hemal, if you want to.
Yeah, I get really excited for, ironically, moving away from text-based in many different ways. I think that multimodal will fundamentally change how we interact with AI. The most simplistic form that I can think about is if we relate it back to how we engage with humans, we do some of this, but a lot of it is being able to speak, right? So you can hear, what do I really care about? Like, what am I accentuating when I talk? Or you can, like, what do I really spend a lot of time focusing on? What do I keep describing over and over and over again? If you had the ability to go and see, you can literally go and point to something to be like, this is actually what I'm looking at and what I'm doing. Or you can use hand gestures to make sure that you can interact with systems overall. And so when I think about what multimodal will do, it's really collapsing the like instruction task of when I tried to go and work with AI. What are some different ways that it can actually truly understand what is important to me? Because as we all know, we always say this, that communication is very much not as much of what you say, but what else it can infer and understand about what you're doing and how you're spending time. So to me, it's actually going to be one of the biggest unlocks of how we interact, whether it's in a work or a non-work perspective. I'm really looking forward to that future.
Yeah. I'm sure all of us are as well. Harry, maybe one last question for you. Just projecting 2-3 years down the line, when we have a large number of agents and they're floating around in enterprises, what new challenges or unforeseen things you think might emerge? Are there any early lessons that we are learning today from large-scale deployments that you're seeing?
I think two things. I think like one of you touched on this, which is like, the first thing is like role-based access control is really hard to get right. It was already really hard to get right, like with humans. And now with like agents, like 100 times more like agents than humans, like it's just really, really hard, right? Like the simplest example is actually like, you know, prompt injection. Like when your agent has like, you know, in different phases of executing a workflow, like what tools do you have access to? It's like prompt injection is still an unsolved problem. And so yeah, I don't have a great solution to role-based access control, but you know, I hope OpenAI or one of you figure something out. Like obviously you put guardrails, right? You put strict guardrails, like there's a way to solve it, but I don't think it's a great way to solve it right now. I think the other thing is like, I kind of mentioned a little bit, it's like, you know how like, it's kind of like in data science, like before AI, when you are doing data science, you're really spending 90% of the time just like getting the data and cleaning up the data. You're only spending 10% of the time doing data science. Like right now, like on large scale enterprise agent deployment, or even just deploying to like SMBs, right? Like 90% of the time are not spending building an actual agent. Building an actual agent is actually very easy if you have a very great orchestration or agent builder, right? 90% of the time is spent plugging into legacy systems, getting all the data cleaned, getting all the context in the right format. Like 90% of the time is spent over there. So yeah, I think that just needs to be a lot easier through any set of solutions. Like, you know, like I think MCP could be one. I think in general, data interpretability needs to like, you know, go up. And another way is, you know, just like, especially for smaller companies, building magical out-of-box solutions where the platform agents are integrated. So, yeah.
Thank you. This has been a fantastic discussion, and I'm sure we can go on for at least another hour, but unfortunately, I think Chris just told me that we are out of time. But before we wrap up, just maybe if each of you can just say one sentence or like a one-liner about the takeaways that you would like to leave us with in this panel. Matan-Paul, do you want to start?
AI is hard.
It's hard, okay. NP hard?
Yeah, I would like to see the agent being human-driven to human-aligned. That's very important. Being autonomous, but never unaccountable. It has to be accountable for all the actions. So that's how the agent should evolve to gain the trust.
Accountable, okay.
I think a lot of technology with AI is really bringing it back down to how do we interact human to human and figure out how we can mimic that in the workplace.
Yeah, for me, it's just to kind of build on what Hemal said. Like, work is social and collaborative, and people want to have that sense of impact and purpose. How do you build the AI systems around that really elevate that human experience?
Eddie?
I want to repeat that building AI agents is very hard. I think I'm a very long-term optimist. I think it's like, I think in a very short term, I think people are overestimating a little bit on what agents can accomplish. There's still a lot that needs to be built. Data interoperability just being 1% of the puzzle. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you, gentlemen, for all of your inputs today.
Thank you.
And thanks, everyone. And I'm sure we'll be happy to chat offline as well.